I'm standing in the nursery we spent $6,000 decorating, holding a piece of paper that has turned the last 3 years of my life into a fictional story. My hands are shaking so violently that the birth certificate is rattling, a sharp, rhythmic sound that feels like a countdown. In the next room, I can hear my wife, Julianne, humming a lullaby to the 2-year-old boy we brought home 4 months ago. The boy she told me was her orphaned nephew. But the document in my hand says something very different. It says the mother isn't her late sister, Sarah. It says the mother is Julianne. And the father? It's not me. It's the man who signs my paychecks. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how I ended up standing in a room full of stuffed animals, feeling like a ghost in my own home, I have to take you back to the beginning. Because for 7 years, I thought I was living the perfect life. Julianne and I were that couple. You know the ones people use as a benchmark for a solid marriage. We lived in a quiet, leafy suburb of Connecticut, in a house with a wraparound porch and a kitchen that always smelled like vanilla because Julianne loved to bake. I'm a senior analyst at a top-tier architectural firm, and Julianne was a freelance interior designer. We had our routines. Every Friday night was pizza and Pinot at a little hole-in-the-wall called Mario's. Every Sunday morning, I'd make blueberry pancakes while she read the paper. I worshipped her. To me, Julianne was the smartest, most graceful woman I'd ever met. And my boss, Marcus Sterling, he was more than just a boss. He was a mentor. He'd mentored me since I was an intern, fast-tracking my career and even attending our wedding. He'd pull me into his office, pour 2 fingers of expensive scotch, and tell me I was the future of the company. I felt lucky. I felt secure. The first crack in the porcelain happened about a year ago. Julianne's sister, Sarah, was always the wild one. She lived out in Oregon, and we didn't see her much. Julianne told me Sarah had gotten pregnant by some drifter and was struggling. Then, 4 months ago, the call came. Julianne collapsed on the kitchen floor, sobbing, saying Sarah had been killed in a car accident. My heart broke for her. And then came the shock. Sarah had left behind a 2-year-old son, Leo, and Julianne was his legal guardian. I didn't hesitate. I told her we'd raise him as our own. We went through the legal process of bringing him from Oregon to Connecticut. Julianne handled all the paperwork, saying her family lawyer back home was taking care of the messy details. I just focused on being a dad. But that should have been my first warning. The speed of it, the lack of a funeral, the way Julianne wouldn't let me see any of Sarah's personal effects. But what came next was so much worse. The unraveling started with a simple, stupid mistake. Julianne had gone to the grocery store and left her iPad on the kitchen counter. It started chiming, a series of frantic notifications. I usually respect her privacy, but the name on the screen caught my eye, Marcus Sterling. Why was my boss messaging my wife at 8 p.m. on a Saturday? I opened the message, thinking it was about the upcoming office gala. It wasn't. It said, "I saw the photos of him in the park today. He's getting his father's eyes. I miss you both." My stomach did a slow, sickening roll. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I scrolled up. There were months of messages. Photos of Leo. Discussions about the plan. Mention of a trust fund Marcus had set up. If that was all I found, maybe I could have convinced myself it was some weird, twisted emotional affair. Maybe I could have rationalized that Marcus was just being an overbearing family friend. But then I saw a message from Julianne sent 3 days before we adopted Leo. The adoption story is set. Sarah is officially out of the picture. He'll never know Leo is ours.
I felt a coldness spread through my chest that I can't describe. It wasn't just sadness. It was a total loss of reality. I looked at the boy sleeping in the other room, the boy I'd been reading bedtime stories to, and realized I didn't even know who he was. I knew I couldn't confront her yet. I needed more. I spent the next week acting like a man who wasn't dying inside. Every time I saw Marcus at the office, shaking my hand and asking how the little guy was doing, I had to fight the urge to vault over his mahogany desk and tear his life apart. But I had to be patient. I started digging. I knew Julianne kept a locked firebox in the back of the guest room closet. She told me it was just old tax returns and her birth certificate. I bought a lock-picking kit online and practiced on an old padlock until I could do it in the dark. On a Tuesday night, while Julianne was at her book club, I opened it. That's when I found the folder. Inside wasn't a death certificate for Sarah. In fact, I found a printout of a social media profile showing Sarah alive and well, living in Bali, teaching yoga. There was no car accident. There was no orphaned nephew. And then, at the very bottom, tucked into a hidden flap, I found it. The real birth certificate. Leo wasn't born in Oregon. He was born in a private clinic in New York City 2 years ago. The mother's name, Julianne Vance. The father's name, Marcus Sterling. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a one-time thing. This was a long-term, calculated play. Julianne had been Marcus's mistress for years. When she got pregnant, they couldn't have the scandal. Marcus is a public figure with a perfect family of his own. So they hid the baby. They stashed him with a nanny for 2 years while they waited for the right time to bring him home to Julianne, using the sister's death as the perfect cover. I was just the convenient idiot who would provide the stable home and the legitimate last name. I sat on the floor of that closet for 3 hours, staring at that paper. I thought about every late night at the office I'd worked to provide for her. I thought about the promotion Marcus gave me right after Leo arrived. Congratulations on the new addition bonus. It was hush money. I was being paid to raise my boss's secret child, and my wife was the one who negotiated the price. I knew exactly what I was going to do, but I had to be patient. I spent the next 3 days acting completely normal. I kissed her goodbye in the morning. I thanked Marcus for the new project assignment. She had no idea what was coming. I decided the reveal had to be public. I couldn't just do it in the kitchen. I wanted the maximum amount of leverage. Our firm's annual partners dinner was that Friday, a black tie event at the Ritz-Carlton. Marcus, his wife, the board of directors, and all the senior staff would be there. Julianne had bought a new emerald green dress for it. She looked beautiful. It made me sick. During the cocktail hour, I was the perfect husband. I held her hand. I laughed at Marcus's jokes. I waited until we were all seated for the main course, a room of 60 people, the pillars of the community. Marcus stood up to give his annual Family and Values speech. At Sterling and Associates, Marcus said, his voice booming and confident, we believe that family is the foundation of everything we build. Look at David here, he pointed at me, smiling. He recently took in his late sister-in-law's son. That's the kind of man we hire. That's the heart of this company. The room erupted in applause. Julianne beamed, leaning her head on my shoulder. This was it. The moment the trap snapped shut. Marcus, if I could just say a few words, I said, standing up. My voice was calm, eerily so. Julianne looked up at me, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. David, what are you doing? She whispered.
I ignored her. I walked to the front of the room, pulling a small stack of high-quality color glossies from my tuxedo jacket. Family is everything, I said to the crowd. Family is everything, and I wanted to share a little gift with everyone tonight to celebrate that. I walked over to the tech assistant running the slideshow for the evening. I handed him a USB drive. Put these up, please. The first image hit the giant projector screen. It wasn't a photo of a building. It was the birth certificate. Huge, impossible to miss. The names Julianne Vance and Marcus Sterling were 6 feet tall. The room went silent. It was a physical weight, that silence. I watched the color drain from Marcus's face so fast I thought he might faint. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping for air. Beside him, his wife, Eleanor, put down her wine glass with a trembling hand, her eyes fixed on the screen. I turned to Julianne. She was still sitting at the table, but she looked like she'd been turned to stone. Her hands were gripping the edge of the white tablecloth so hard her knuckles were white. Her eyes were darting toward the exit, but there was nowhere to go. You see, I said, my voice projecting to the back of the hall, I found out that I'm not an uncle, and Leo isn't an orphan. He's a very lucky boy, actually. He has his mother right here, I gestured to Julianne, and his father right there. I pointed at Marcus. David, stop this, Julianne hissed, her voice cracking. She tried to stand up, but her legs seemed to give way and she slumped back into her chair. Why, Julianne? Is the adoption story not working anymore? I leaned in close to the microphone. I also have the logs of the trust fund Marcus set up using company offshore accounts. You know, the one you two discussed while I was at work. I'm sure the board of directors would love to see the financial trail. Marcus finally found his voice. David, we can talk about this privately. This is a misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, Marcus. It's a birth certificate. And these, I clicked the remote, and the screen changed to the text messages between them. These are the receipts of a 3-year betrayal. The murmurs started then, low, shocked whispers that grew into a roar of conversation. Eleanor Sterling stood up, looked at Marcus with a coldness that would freeze a volcano, and walked out of the room without a single word. The board members were huddled together, their faces grim. I walked back to the table. Julianne was shaking, tears streaming down her face. "David, please, I did it for us. I wanted a family." "No," I said, leaning down so only she could hear me. "You did it for him, and you used me as the landfill for your secrets. I've already moved my things out of the house. The locks are being changed as we speak. My lawyer will be calling you tomorrow. Oh, and Marcus, I expect my severance package to be very, very generous, or the police get the files on that trust fund." I didn't wait for a response. I walked out of that ballroom with my head held high. The ringing in my ears had finally stopped, replaced by a strange, hollow peace. The aftermath was a whirlwind, but I never looked back. Marcus was forced to resign within the week to avoid a full-scale audit and a public scandal. His wife took him for everything he had in a divorce that made the local papers. Julianne tried to crawl back, sending me dozens of emails about shared history and forgiveness, but I blocked her on everything. I don't know where they are now, and honestly, I don't care.
I moved to a different city, took a job with a rival firm, and started over. Sometimes I still think about Leo. I hope he's okay. I hope he grows up to be nothing like the people who brought him into this world. But I know one thing for sure. I'm no longer the man living a lie in a house that smells like vanilla. I'm finally living my own life, and for the first time in years, I can breathe. The truth didn't just set me free, it gave me back the person I used to be before I met her. And that person is doing just fine.